Grüß, willkommen in einem anderen Aufregens video, or welcome to another exciting video, in this case episode 51 of my game system design series. In this video I'll be investigating what are gamers looking for when they play a game, specifically a figure game. After I watched a computer game review which questioned the player's objective for actually playing that particular computer game, I realised I'd never looked closely at what a gamer is looking for in a game, particularly a figure game. I briefly covered this in other videos, but never from the specific perspective of the gamer's desires and wishes. This is my attempt at basically looking at this topic, and I must admit it's a rather subjective attempt. In previous videos I've covered the gamer's development or evolution of the gamer, how they start gaming and how they develop or progress. Assuming a gamer has progressed to the point they're reasonably experienced and have tried a variety of different options, what are they now seeking when they want to play a game? The first rather obvious conclusion is gamers will have different objectives. To deal with this, I will try and group these objectives, while I have to admit individually they will still have significant nuance, but will nonetheless share many common traits. The first group is PvP, or player versus player, battle of wits. This is where a player's main objective is to compete against other players with the objective of proving his or her skill or knowledge of the game system. The classic example is a chess tournament or points-based competition in the figure gaming or board gaming world. PvP attracts younger gamers, in the most part, as it's an easy way to learn a set of rules or game and to gain skill rapidly. Also, younger players want to prove themselves in a similar manner to ancient tribal warriors coming of age. Everyone believes they are better and smarter than most other people, and competitive gaming is one method of proving this, or otherwise in most cases. Older players will have different objectives, which we'll deal with in detail later, but the older someone is, the more they realise they are not above average, and that competitive games often are decided on how much time you have spent preparing from them, and really very little to do with innate skills. Many years ago I used to play chess, board gaming and figure gaming competitions, and while I enjoyed them I realised they do have their limitations. I quickly realised that to win you needed to know the game backwards and practice a lot. Victory went to those who had the greatest experience. Thus for board gaming I would often play against new players in early rounds and almost effortlessly win against them because I had played the game possibly 50-60 times, and my opponent had barely played it once or twice. The latter rounds were played against the more experienced players, and in these games I really had to sweat it out. But often victory was determined in the board game area by the board game that was selected and how many times an individual player had actually played the board game prior. If my opponent was clearly the better player in terms of innate skill, I could still win a game in a competition if the game that I had selected was one that I had physically played and practiced the most. Figure gaming competitions were more complex, but generally followed this rule. I played in WRG Cold War micro armor competitions for the most part, and victory almost went to the player who had the greater experience rather than any inherent skills. Once both players were experienced, the game scenarios often caused issue, and victory going to the player which had the last move. But this was a specific scenario issue which is outside of the scope of the video. Napoleonic figure gaming competitions were similar to Cold War or World War II competition, where experience, that is, how many times you've played with the rules and that particular scenario, was the key factor. This is mainly due to basically the armies being reasonably similar. However, the same could not be said of ancients. Ancients competition introduced wildly different armies which had a real rock, paper, scissors effect. The complexity of what wins or loses means a lot of effort has to go into understanding all the possible combinations. In this situation, experience is still critical, but a lucky combination may even be more effective. This gives ancient competitions in some ways more legs, so to speak, but once players really get experience, they'll have a good understanding of the troop type matrix and will start winning based on experience. They'll also quickly determine, well, my troops aren't going to win against them, so my strategy is going to be drawing this out for a draw and things of that nature. But you need to understand that up front, and that takes a lot of gaming in order to get there. In conclusion, the PvP objective in of itself does run its course. If there is a reward for victory, it'll be more of an incentive to continue, but without a significant rewards, most players will go through the PvP phase and realise victory goes to the person who has the most time and energy to practice. While inherent skill does play a part, training and more training has a more significant impact. The next group is player versus computer, or more accurately, against the game system. I have to admit this is more of a computer game thing rather than the figure gaming, but nonetheless I need to cover it. This moves into the area of solving a puzzle more than a game, but it's when a player wants to work out how to do something unexpected or work out how to find an unexpected advantage against the system. That tends to be the key. While PvC means you play against AI in most computer games, one aspect of the game is to find the weakness of the AI. The AI never exploits this move, for example, or does not see that move, for example, or always does this stupid response to an unexpected action, for example. The same applies with game systems when you're playing solitaire board games, for that matter. This objective is very much one for the nerds, but it's based on study, playtesting, and then trying to find out if your new strategy works against, for example, a real player. While it's linked to the PvP objective, it's more about trying to break the system. Most players would dabble with this as they learn a new set of rules, but very few players take it very seriously. However, like the PvP objective, it does have a limited lifespan. Eventually players realise that they're only on this earth for a limited time, and spending huge amounts of time trying to break a system with seeming minimal reward is not an effective way to use your time. For PvP or PvC players, the actual quality of the rules is irrelevant. The only issue arises if the rules are so badly written it's difficult to understand how to play. But putting that aside, any set of rules, no matter how good or flawed, can provide players with a PvP or PvC game. The next group moves right away from the nerd zone and covers players who wish a social game. These are players who enjoy the social interaction of a game, and they range from players who care about who wins to those who do not. The main objective is to have a quick, fun game with as many people you can interact with as possible. Before I proceed, I need to exclude players who have minimal interest in the game themselves, such as people who like Monopoly, Risk or Twister. This is an important gaming area, but does not cover figure gaming. To have an interest in figure gaming means a player needs interest in the figures, period, or game mechanics. A good litmus test is games such as Avalon Hill Civilization. If you're happy to play Civilization, then you have a good chance of being happy playing a social figure game, for example. The most common social figure game is the so-called multiplayer monster game. Number of players refighting a game on a large playing area, which does require a large gaming area and can be set up for several days, or needs to be set up for several days. There are many ways to conduct such a game, but the main factor is lots of gamers all getting together to game on a single table. This tends to be most common with Napoleonic players. The rules can be anything which supports large games. They can be simple or complex. Other types of social figure gamers involve only two players, perhaps one player teaching another the rules, or two players with some free time at a club trying out a new set of rules. This does require either very simple rules or one player teaching the other how to play. This is only barely a social game and is closer to a teaching or testing exercise. But if the game is short, it could be grouped into the social gamer grouping. Social gamers require rules which are reasonably simple or easy to learn. Very complex rules would result in a lot of bored players. They also require a set of rules which facilitates more than one player per side, such as using a fixed sequence of play. Once again, the quality of the rules is almost irrelevant, as it's unlikely any form of result will be achieved in a day. This is just an excuse to get together, have some beers and talk about old times or history. The next group is the modelers. This is an interesting type of player as the player's main focus is on collecting and painting figures. In many cases, that's all they do, but often they will want to use their figures, thus giving them a reason to buy and paint more figures. The modeler is not that interested in the game as long as a playing area is created which looks good and the figures are placed on it. All they need to do is move around them a bit before packing them away. While you may feel this is silly, you'd be surprised at the number of gamers or games where nothing much occurs and there is no result, yet the players or gamers seem to be happy. I must admit there are few pure modelers. Most players delude themselves that they are going to play a game where all they really wish to do is set up a game and look on it in wonder. However, these players still need to at least make a pretense of playing a game. Modelers are often like social gamers, like monster games. However, I suspect they would not be too keen on allowing their figures to remain off-site, so I suspect they would be the person organising the game. While the modeler often focuses on the figures, they quickly realise their figures will look better if it's played on a beautiful playing area. The modelling focus will thus extend to the playing area. Every player has a bit of the modeler in them, and these groups are not exclusive. However, each player will only have a primary focus, and it's the players who only wish to focus on the modelling aspect that really falls into this group. Once again, we discover the modeler does not really care very much about the rules. Once they learn a set of rules, they're unwilling to try something else, as this represents unnecessary effort. They do also care little about who wins, who loses, or even if the game is completed. In many cases, it's better the game is not completed, so their figures remain on the playing area longer. Now we come to the rules designer. This group of players' main focus is designing rules. If it's not their rules, they focus on modifying existing rules. They tend to be negative about any set of rules that they have not designed, but rarely play a game with rules that they have not designed. There are different types of designers. One type is interested in game systems, thus will focus on innovative sequence of plays and totally out-of-the-box rules ideas. I tend to fall in this group. However, this is not my main focus. As long as there is a workable set of rules to play, I'm happy. I will prefer to use them than coming up with anything myself. A true games designer will only use someone else's rules, kicking and screaming. Other designers are obsessed with historical accuracy. Unfortunately, these type of rules designers will mostly likely come up with impossibly complex sets of unplayable rules, so they tend to be the most useless players, at least in my experience. The game system designers will often design some very playable game systems, but the historical accuracy designer will rarely do so. In most cases, the designer obsessed with historical accuracy will end up being an umpire for an established set of rules, which the designer will tolerate. Once they become an expert in an established set of rules and create some modifications, they often become happy with those rules, even if they actually rarely play them themselves. They can be incredibly useful as an umpire, or even someone who can teach new players the rules. As the main objectives of the designer is to design or modify rules, they have no real objective concerning the actual rules themselves. As long as they design it or are the expert, they care little for the actual rules. The only point to note is the game system designer will often create good sets of rules which are very playable, so the focus for these type of players is playability. But as they rarely play a game, I suspect victory conditions and ending a game tends to even be a low priority for these guys. The historian is focused on understanding what happened in history. They're not really interested in the effectiveness of the Dacian two-handed sword, but are interested in how Hannibal achieved his victory at Cannae. In simple terms, they prefer reproducing historical battles in order to understand them better. The historian is only interested in refighting a historical battle, and you will mainly find them in the Napoleonic space. World War II or Cold War rarely allows you to refight a meaningful battle, and with ancients, information is so sparse it's difficult to create a historical battle, but it is kind of possible and has been done by some of these designers. The historian is not competitive, so normally does not care who wins or loses. The historian is not interested in breaking the system to find loopholes. Social interaction is a focus, especially when it's to discuss the battle being fought. Often the historian may put a lot of effort into creating scenarios for historical battles when they don't exist, but are happy with existing scenarios as well. A historian seeks out rules which allow him or her to refight a historical battle. The rules will need to be robust, free of faults, and be sufficiently historical at the scale selected to be credible. Often the rules can be very simple indeed. The classic example is a set of rules which fit in this category is Lost Battles, but SPI board games and some Napoleonics and World War II rules from SPI also fall into this category. The historian will not tolerate over-abstract rules, such as snappy, nappy, or blucher, and will shy away from overly or unnecessarily complex rules such as DBM or DBMM. This type of player has a strong focus on using a simple, robust and complete set of rules in order to achieve their objective and will be highly selective. This is the first type of player covered so far who has a real credible focus on the rules and on the game experience. The problem solver wants to be given an ad hoc and unique problem to solve. While this may look a bit like PvP group, the problem which needs to be solved needs to be one where no preparation has been made. This way we eliminate, for the most part, the issue with experience or playtesting or just how many times you played the scenario in terms of time and effort spent doing that. This type of game can be achieved by two players trying a new set of rules, or better, a new scenario for the first time. However, once the scenario has been played, it no longer offers any excitement, unless of course if a player who has a PvP motive and wants to try a new tactic is one of those two players. Often the game involves a discussion of the tactics, what went wrong and what went right. While the set of rules may not be that important, to avoid the issue with time and effort spent training on a new game system, the rules should be reasonably simple. Another option is both players have the same experience with the rules, which is harder to determine but is possible if two players are learning a new set of rules together. But for a complete game where the players spend all their time solving a puzzle rather than learning a set of rules, will require a simple set of rules. In many cases, the rules need to allow for reasonably quick games, perhaps 2 to 4 hours. The largest issue with this gamer is the lack of simple ad hoc scenario generation systems, which is balanced. While trying out new scenarios will work, if there are enough of them, if not, you need a simple scenario generation system. The most common is a points-based game between equal forces, which is a single scenario and is played out after one game, quite frankly. There are rules such as Panzerkorps, which have a large number of scenarios, but a lot of rules lack scenarios or a quick ad hoc scenario generation system. The experimenters are an unusual and rare group, those players who like to experiment with different game systems and periods. This rarely lasts long and is normally conducted by a gamer to find a period or set of rules they wish to focus on, or alternatively to assist them in designing a set of rules. They have no specific rules objectives or preferences and are just gaming to get a feel for the rules or the period. Assuming my grouping does cover all gamers, and if we look at the grouping so far, we quickly see why so many games never complete. For many gamers, it's simply not a priority. It's also to see why scenarios have such a low priority in many cases. If you don't complete a game, you probably don't care about the scenario as well. It's also easy to see why there is an increased focus on simple, quick play rules, as a reasonable number of players want those types of rules. It's quite likely that my list is not complete and I've probably missed different groups of gamers, and if I ever find those new groups I'll probably go back and modify this video, but I feel confident I've captured the bulk of gamer types that exist out there today. The conclusion I draw from this is that a simple, complete and well-supported set of rules is what would be the most attractive to the greatest number of players. This is certainly not a surprise, but this analysis allowed me to get an idea of how important that is. There are also groups of gamers which care little for simple rules or for victory conditions or even to complete a game. I should not be surprised at this, but I always thought that this common occurrence of that is, games not completing, was due to some major failing of rules design. Now I realise it's because many players don't consider completing a game important. Some gamers want rules such as Empire Third, which are complex, hard to play, and can never be completed in a day. Who would have thought? Of course, this analysis does not presume every player is dominated by a single objective, nor do they never change their objectives as they progress down the path of their hobby. Every player contains several, if not all, the described groups at some point in their hobby life. It's just the priority will change or be different between players. There are other factors not included here, which can also be drivers that can be at work. A player may enter a competition and will find themselves with a strong motivation to study the rules, practice and even change their gaming style. The reason is the objective has moved to doing well in the competition. Other external factors are campaigns. Once part of a campaign, a player has a larger context, as well as each game having more importance. While I was conducting research for this video, I came across this German research paper. This shows an English version, and as it directly relates to how gamers differ from the general population, I think it would be useful to briefly go over it. Robert Kerner, Jana Kammerhoff, and Astra Schutz from the Otto Friedrich University of Bamberg, Friedrich, have just published a fascinating article in the Journal of Individual Differences, dated 2020, entitled "Who Commands the Little Soldiers? A comparison of the personality traits of miniature wargame players with other gamers and non-gamers." Let's look at their findings. However, just one point, this only involved German-speaking gamers, with a large group of the military wargamers being 40k Warhammer gamers. They also covered RPG gamers, which I will not mention in this video particularly much. In the study, no differences between the groups were found for neuroticism and agreeableness. Thus, gamers cannot be regarded as emotionally unstable or disagreeable individuals, as some stereotypes claim. I must admit I found this surprising, but I might as well accept the findings. In regards to reasoning ability, all players scored higher than participants from the general population. This, I feel, is self-evident. Results also indicate significant differences with respect to conventionalism, authoritarian submission, and authoritarian aggression, such that all three groups of gamers described themselves as less authoritarian than participants from the general population did. Also, I consider there to be no surprises with this conclusion. With regards to everyday risk orientation, military wargamers players' self-reports were similar to those of RPG players, and both types of gamers reported less risk orientation than non-gamers from the general population. I suppose this seems reasonable as well. Regarding motives, military wargamers players have a higher afflictation value than individuals from the general population. I have to admit I'm uncertain what this really means, but as many wargamers are members of wargaming clubs, I suppose it is reasonable. No differences between military wargamer players and others were found on the power, achievements and fear motives. I would have thought achievement would have been higher, but apparently not. With respect to intimacy motives, military wargame players scored higher than RPG players did. Apparently military wargamers players appreciate close interpersonal relationships. I must admit this one really threw me. A bunch of guys getting together to play a game of Spearhead does not seem to be something or someone seeking intimacy would probably be inclined to do. But then perhaps we're all there for the bromance, who knows. To summarise, in line with our second hypothesis, military wargame players may seem to be open-minded, empathetic, non-authoritarian individuals. However, the stereotypes of gamers as nerdy and sharp-minded does seem to have a kernel of truth. And because reasoning scores are high in all three samples of gamers, and as reasoning ability is a key predictor of academic and occupational success, according to Kramer in 2009, military wargame players cannot easily be dismissed as acting in a dysfunctional manner. On that rather happy note, this concludes episode 52 of my video series on game design theory, in this case discussing the objective of players or figure gamers. Alle guten Dinge kommen zu einem Ende.